My name is George Miller. I'm 68 years old, a retired electrician, and a father who thought he had done everything right. For years, I worked overtime, saved every dime, and poured my heart into helping my only daughter, Emily, start her adult life on solid ground. When she met Brian, I welcomed him like a son. I paid their rent when jobs were scarce, fixed their old car when it broke down, and covered hospital bills without hesitation. So when I asked about their wedding date, I expected to be included, maybe even honored as the father who had carried them this far. Instead, Brian looked me straight in the eye, a smug grin on his face, and said, "We got married yesterday. We only invited special guests." In that moment, my world collapsed. I realized that in their eyes, I was good enough to pay the bills but never special enough to stand beside them. I stood there frozen, his words echoing in my head like a cruel joke I wasn't in on. We got married yesterday. We only invited special guests. Special guests. The phrase cut sharper than any insult I'd ever heard in my life. I wasn't just excluded, I was erased. For days leading up to that moment, I'd been checking my calendar, half expecting Emily to finally call and say, "Dad, mark the date, we need you there." I had gone shopping for a suit that fit my age but still looked sharp, navy blue with a crisp white shirt. I'd even laid it out across the bed, pressing the wrinkles out like I was preparing for the proudest walk of my life. I had saved $1,000 in an envelope, planning to hand it to them as a wedding gift, sealed with a father's blessing. And yet here I was, blindsided, learning that the wedding had already happened and that I wasn't worthy of an invitation. That night, I couldn't bring myself to eat. My kitchen table, usually cluttered with bills and grocery lists, had the envelope with the $1,000 sitting in the center like some cruel reminder. My mind kept replaying everything I had done over the years. The rent I had covered month after month when their landlord threatened eviction. The car I had paid to repair so Brian could drive to work only for him to quit a month later. The groceries I'd dropped off, the holidays I'd hosted, the dozens of sacrifices I'd made so Emily wouldn't feel the absence of her mother too sharply. And now my own daughter's husband had the audacity to tell me I wasn't a special guest. What made it worse was knowing it wasn't just Brian. He might have spoken the words, but Emily was there. She was part of that wedding. She had to have known I'd be hurt. She had to have seen me in her mind, sitting alone, wondering why my phone never rang. And yet she went through with it. She stood there in her dress, smiling for pictures with Brian's family, raising a glass of champagne, while her father sat at home polishing shoes for a wedding I would never attend. The next morning, I forced myself to log on to social media. Maybe I wanted to prove it wasn't true, that Brian was just taunting me. But the evidence was right there. Photos of Emily in a white dress I recognized. I had helped pay for it when she told me she needed money for school expenses. Brian in a rented tuxedo. His parents standing proudly beside them. His sisters clinking glasses in a toast. A hashtag announcing their intimate wedding. Intimate. That word mocked me almost as much as special. I wasn't intimate enough. I wasn't special enough. I was the man behind the curtain, pulling levers, paying bills, keeping the show running but never allowed to step on stage. I shut my laptop so hard the frame cracked. My chest burned with humiliation. The phone rang later that afternoon, my sister calling from Chicago. She asked when the big day was, since I had told her months earlier to keep her schedule open. I couldn't answer. My throat tightened. I lied and said, "They haven't picked a date yet." I couldn't bear to admit to her that I wasn't even invited to my own daughter's wedding. That evening, I walked through my small house like a stranger. Every corner reminded me of them. The sofa I had bought when their old one broke down and they didn't have the money. The refrigerator I had filled countless times with milk, eggs, and meat when Emily called crying that she didn't know how they'd eat that week. Even the small dining table, where I had once imagined hosting them after the wedding, sat mocking me. I had cleaned it, polished it, hoping to set out champagne glasses and celebrate. Now it was just empty wood under my hands. I sat down, gripping the envelope of cash, and felt like a fool. I thought of my late wife, Mary, and what she would say if she were alive. She had always warned me not to let Emily lean on me too much, not to let Brian take advantage. "You spoil them, George," she'd say, half joking but half serious. And I'd brush it off, insisting that one day Emily would see how much I had done for her, that she'd repay me with love and respect. But she hadn't. She had chosen someone else's definition of family. She had chosen to let her husband speak for both of them, to define me as unworthy. That night, I finally broke. Not just a few tears, but a flood of them. I wept into my hands like a child, ashamed of myself for believing I could buy my way into their hearts. All those years of overtime, of bending my back on ladders and lifting heavy wires, all the sacrifices I made, they didn't make me special. They just made me useful. And now, apparently, I wasn't even that. The morning after my breakdown, I sat at the kitchen table with a pad of paper and a pen, something I hadn't done in years. I started writing down every single expense I had covered for Emily and Brian. I thought it might calm me, maybe prove that I wasn't imagining things. Instead, with every line I wrote, my anger thickened like wet cement. Rent $700 a month for 2.5 years. I scratched the numbers down. That alone was over 20 grand. Car repairs $2,100. Hospital bills $1,500. Groceries too many to count, but at least $200 every month. The numbers piled up, column after column, until I stared at a total that made my stomach churn. In 3 years, I had poured more than $30,000 into their lives. $30,000 from my pension, my savings, the money I had planned to use for my own retirement. That was supposed to be for my trips to see my sister, for the fishing boat I'd dreamed of owning, for quiet evenings where I didn't have to check the balance in my account twice before buying a steak. But I had handed it over, piece by piece, like it was nothing. The worst part? I gave it gladly. Every time Emily called with that panicked voice, "Dad, we're short this month," I would rush to the bank without hesitation. I told myself I was protecting her, that I was helping her avoid hardship. When Brian got laid off from his warehouse job, I stepped in to cover their rent so they wouldn't lose the apartment. When Emily needed dental work, I put it on my credit card because they didn't have insurance. I can still remember one Christmas when I had just enough to buy myself a new winter coat. I'd been wearing the same one for 10 years, the zipper broken, the lining thin. I picked one out at the store, warm and heavy, and stood in line with it draped over my arm. Then my phone buzzed. Emily's name lit up. She was crying something about their heat bill being overdue and the company threatening to shut it off in the middle of December. I put the coat back and walked out of the store. The money went straight to their heating company. That winter I layered 2 sweaters under my old jacket, telling myself it didn't matter, that I could be cold if it meant my daughter stayed warm. Brian always made it sound like I was some kind of hero. "You saved us again, George. You're a lifesaver." He'd pat me on the back, call me Dad, in that easy way of his, and for a moment I believed it. I thought he respected me. I thought maybe he even loved me. But those words at the wedding revealed the truth. I wasn't a father to him, I was a wallet. A bank account with legs. What cut deepest was realizing how often I had put my own life on hold for them. I skipped trips, avoided dinners out, canceled plans with friends, all because I felt guilty spending money on myself when they were struggling. I told myself, one day Emily will look back and realize how much her dad did for her. One day she'll thank me. But she never did. Instead, she let her husband tell me I wasn't special. She smiled in wedding photos with his family, not mine. She toasted to a future I wasn't invited into. I thought about Mary again, me late wife. She would have been furious if she saw the way things turned out. She was always more cautious, more practical. She'd say, "George, love doesn't mean letting people take advantage. Even your own child. But I didn't listen. I thought generosity was love. I thought money could hold us together when grief and time tried to pull us apart. I realized then that I had been wrong, maybe for years. What I had built wasn't a family, it was a dependency. And like all dependencies, it grew hungrier with time. As I looked at the numbers scrawled across my pad, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It wasn't just humiliation. It was anger, pure, focused anger. Anger at myself for being blind, anger at Brian for exploiting me, anger at Emily for letting him. The total stared back at me, $30,000 and change. That was the price tag of my foolish hope that money could buy me a place in their hearts. I pushed the pad away and leaned back in my chair. My hands trembled, not from weakness, but from a growing certainty. I wasn't going to let them take another dime. Not rent. Not groceries. Not one more dollar for people who couldn't even bother to invite me to their wedding. That night, as I turned off the lights in my living room, I said it out loud to the empty house. No more. The words felt strange on my tongue, but powerful too. Like the first brick in a wall I should have built years ago. And deep down, I knew that sooner or later, Emily and Brian were going to notice that wall and they weren't going to like it. It didn't even take a week. 7 days after Brian looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't special, my phone lit up with his number. At first, I let it ring. My gut told me whatever he had to say, it wouldn't be worth hearing. But when the call came again 2 minutes later, and then again after that, I finally picked up. His voice wasn't smug this time. It was tight, nervous, almost trembling. Hey, George, listen. We've got a little situation. The rent's overdue, and the landlord is threatening to throw us out if we don't pay by Friday. You didn't forget to transfer it, did you? I nearly laughed out loud. Forget? As if I owed him anything. As if paying his rent was some kind of duty etched into the laws of the universe. For a moment I stayed silent, just listening to his panicked breathing on the other end of the line. I wanted him to feel the weight of that silence, the weight of every time I had dropped everything to rescue them. Finally, I said, calm and measured, Brian, tell me something. Do you remember what you said to me last week when I asked about the wedding? There was a pause. I could almost hear him swallow. George, that was things were hectic, you know. We had to keep it small. No, I cut in, my voice sharper now. You didn't say it was hectic. You didn't say it was small. You said you only invited special guests. That's what you said. Another silence. His breathing quickened. Well, yeah, but look, Emily and I, we didn't mean it like that. You are special, of course you are. We just... I couldn't hold it anymore. The bitterness inside me boiled into words, cold and precise. Now you need the rent paid, and suddenly I'm special again. Is that how it works? I'm only special when my wallet's open. The line went dead silent. For once, Brian didn't have a smooth comeback, no quick excuse, no fake laugh. George, come on, he finally muttered, his voice slipping into that wheedling tone I'd come to recognize. Don't do this. We're your family. You know we're counting on you. Without your help. Without my help, I interrupted, you'd have to do what every other grown adult in this country does, figure it out yourselves. Get a job. Pay your bills. Take responsibility. You're 35, Brian. 35. Do you realize I owned a house and raised a child at your age? He tried to chuckle, but it came out strained. Times are different now. No, Brian, I said firmly. Character is the same. Integrity is the same. And you and Emily have none of it when it comes to me. I could hear him pacing on the other end, muttering under his breath. Then his voice turned sharp, defensive. So that's it. After everything, you're just gonna cut us off. We depended on you. We counted on you. What are we supposed to do now? The old meth man who had sacrificed coat after coat, meal after meal might have caved right there. Might have dug into his savings one more time, convincing himself it was just this once. But that man was gone. You should have thought about that, I said quietly, before you made sure I wasn't at my own daughter's wedding. I hung up. My hand shook as I set the phone down on the table, but not from fear or guilt. It was adrenaline, the rush of finally speaking the truth I had swallowed for years. For the first time, Brian was the one left scrambling. For the first time, I wasn't the safety net under his reckless life. The phone rang again 5 minutes later. This time it was Emily. I stared at the screen, my heart tightening. A part of me wanted to answer, wanted to hear her voice, wanted to believe she was calling because she loved me, not because the rent was overdue. But deep down, I knew better. I let it ring out. That night, I didn't sit at the table with my pad of expenses. I didn't replay wedding photos in my head. I simply sat in my armchair, the phone face down, and let the silence of my house surround me. It was the most peaceful silence I'd known in years. Because for once, I wasn't being used. For once, I wasn't handing over my dignity in exchange for a crumb of affection. And though I knew the storm hadn't passed, that Brian and Emily would come back, angrier, more desperate, I also knew something else. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. 2 mornings after Brian's desperate call, I woke up before the sun, restless and determined. My coffee sat untouched on the counter while I put on my best jacket. It wasn't for style, it was for armor. That day, I was going to the bank, and for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't going there to give. I was going to take something back. The branch was quiet when I walked in, the smell of fresh paper and ink mixing with the faint hum of fluorescent lights. I'd been here so many times before, always in a hurry, always with a form in hand to wire money to Emily and Brian's landlord. It had become routine, like clockwork. The tellers even used to smile knowingly at me, as if I were some generous old saint keeping my daughter's young family afloat. But today, I felt different. My steps were heavier, more deliberate, as if every footfall said, "No more." "Mr. Miller," a voice greeted warmly. It was Alan Peters, the branch manager, a man in his 40s with an easy smile. We'd known each other for years. He had processed more of my transactions than I could count. "How are you? Another transfer for your kids today?" That question, so casual, so expected, was the spark I needed. "Not today, Alan," I said firmly. "I'm here to cancel every single automatic transfer I've got set up for Emily and Brian. Effective immediately." For a second, he blinked, surprised. Then he leaned forward. "Are you sure, George? You've been supporting them a long time. Did something happen?" "Something happen." The understatement almost made me laugh. I wanted to tell him about the wedding, about the phrase "special guests" that had burned into my memory like a scar. But instead, I just said, "Yes, Alan. I'm sure. I've spent over $30,000 on them, and I've gotten nothing back but disrespect. It ends today." He nodded slowly, respect flickering across his face. "All right, let's get this taken care of." He led me to his office, and I sat across from him at a neat wooden desk. As he typed into his computer, canceling transfer after transfer, I felt a strange mix of emotions swirl inside me. Relief, yes, but also fear. Fear of what Emily would say when the payments didn't arrive. Fear of Brian's anger. Fear of the loneliness that would surely follow once they realized I wasn't bending anymore. "George," Alan said gently, glancing up at me. "If you don't mind me saying, I think this is brave. I've seen a lot of parents give until they have nothing left. But few ever stop. Most just keep draining themselves." His words caught me off guard. Brave? I had never thought of myself that way. To me, I'd always been weak, too afraid of losing Emily's love to stand my ground. But maybe bravery wasn't about being unafraid. Maybe it was about being terrified and still doing the right thing. "Thank you, Alan," I managed, my throat tight. "It's time." When the last transfer was cancelled, Alan slid a stack of papers across the desk for me to sign. My hand shook as I put pen to paper. Not from age, not from nervousness, this was something deeper. It felt like I was signing a declaration of independence, my own personal emancipation. When I finished, Alan gathered the papers and said, "That's it. You're free of those obligations. Your money is yours again. Your money is yours again." I let the words sink in. They were so simple, yet I realized I hadn't felt that truth in years. As I left the bank, the September air felt fresher, sharper. The trees lining the street seemed brighter, their leaves shimmering gold in the sunlight. I knew Emily and Brian would notice soon enough. The phone would ring, there would be anger, accusations, maybe even threats. But for once, I didn't feel like prey. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with my checkbook open. For years, this table had been the battlefield where I'd sacrificed my own plans for theirs, canceled trips, postponed repairs, abandoned hobbies. But that night, it became something new, a command center. I began sketching out a different kind of future. One where I wasn't the emergency contact for every whim they couldn't afford. One where the money in my account went to my needs, my dreams. I thought about taking that fishing trip I had postponed for decades. I thought about visiting my sister in Chicago and surprising her for her birthday. For the first time in years, the numbers I wrote down weren't obligations, they were possibilities. The phone rang twice that night, both times from Emily. I didn't answer. Let her wonder. Let her realize the river had run dry. Instead, I poured myself a glass of bourbon, leaned back in my chair, and whispered the words I had spoken days earlier. No more. And this time, I didn't just believe them, I felt them. Deep in my bones. It was only a matter of time before Brian and Emily came knocking, their anger boiling over. But I was ready. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't their lifeline. I was George Miller again. A father, yes, but a man who had finally remembered that his life mattered too. It didn't take long. For days after I cancelled the transfers, I came home from the grocery store and noticed 2 cars parked crooked in my driveway, Emily's silver sedan and Brian's beat-up truck. My heart sank, but I knew this moment was coming. They had realized the money was gone, and they weren't going to let it slide. As I climbed my porch steps, I heard voices inside my house. My house. My stomach twisted. They had a key, of course I had given it to them back when I thought trust was natural between family. That was a mistake I would never make again. I pushed the door open, and the sight before me stopped me cold. Brian sat sprawled across my recliner, arms folded like he owned the place. Emily was pacing back and forth in the living room, her face flushed. And at my dining table, a man in a gray suit shuffled through a stack of papers. My papers. What the hell is going on here? My voice boomed louder than I expected. They all turned. Brian was the first to speak, his tone slick and falsely casual. "George, glad you're here. We need to have a talk." Emily stepped forward, her voice softer, almost pleading. "Dad, please, don't be upset. This is Mr. Halpern, a family attorney. He's here to help us help you." "Help me?" I repeated, narrowing my eyes. "By going through my documents without my permission?" Mr. Halpern stood, smoothing his tie, and extended his hand as if we were about to have a polite business meeting. "Mr. Miller, I understand this may look intrusive, but your children are concerned about your well-being. They think it would be best if you allowed them to help manage your finances through a simple power of attorney. Temporary, of course." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I marched straight to the table and snatched the stack of papers from under his fingers. Bills, bank statements, insurance documents, me life spread out like evidence in a courtroom. Emily reached for my arm, her eyes wide with that fake tenderness I had seen too many times when she wanted something. Dad, you've been acting strange lately. Cutting us off like this, not answering calls, it's not like you. We're worried. I yanked my arm free. Strange? You want to talk about strange? Strange is your husband telling me I wasn't special enough to be at your wedding. Strange is using my money for 3 years and then pretending I don't exist when it's convenient. Emily's face reddened, but she pressed on. We didn't mean it like that. The wedding was small, just family. Family? I snapped. Then what am I? The room went silent. For the first time, Emily couldn't look me in the eye. Brian leaned forward in the recliner, his tone hardening. Look, George, let's not make this a fight. You've supported us this long, and we're grateful. But the way you cut us off out of nowhere, that's not responsible. You're making rash decisions. This document will just allow us to handle things for you until you're thinking clearly again. He gestured at the papers I still held. A power of attorney, plain and simple. Once I signed, they'd have full control. My bank accounts, my savings, everything. I let out a bitter laugh. So that's the plan. Declare me incompetent, strip me of control, and funnel the money right back into your pockets. You don't want to help me or want to own me. Mr. Halpern stepped in again, his voice calm but patronizing. Mr. Miller, I've seen this before. Older individuals sometimes resist help, but this is really for your protection. Wouldn't it be a relief to let your children shoulder the burden? I tossed the papers into the trash can beside the table. The sound of them hitting the bottom echoed through the room. The only burden I've been carrying is the 2 of them. Brian shot to his feet, his face red with fury. You can't just throw this away. We've got bills to pay, rent, car payments, credit cards. We made commitments because we thought we could count on you. Count on me? My voice rose, trembling with years of pent-up anger. I paid rent on an apartment I didn't live in. I fixed a car I didn't drive. I filled a fridge I never ate from. And you, I jabbed a finger toward him, had the nerve to tell me I wasn't special enough for your wedding. And now you expect me to hand you the keys to my life? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but I knew them well, tears of frustration, not sorrow. Dad, please. You're overreacting. We're a family. Everything you have is going to be ours one day anyway. Why not make it easier now? There it was. The naked truth. You're not waiting for me to live out my years, I said coldly. You're waiting for me to die. And since I haven't died fast enough, you're trying to speed things up. The words hung heavy in the air. Even Mr. Halpern shifted uncomfortably. I pointed to the door. All 3 of you. Out. Now. Brian opened his mouth to argue, but something in my stare must have told him I meant it. With a snarl, he grabbed his jacket. Emily lingered, looking at me with a mix of anger and desperation, but when I didn't soften, she followed him. Mr. Halpern gathered his briefcase, muttering about unfinished business, but I ignored him. The doors slammed shut behind them, leaving my house wrapped in silence. My heart was pounding, my hands shaking, but not from fear. From power. From finally standing my ground. For the first time in years, I had defended myself. And though I knew this battle wasn't over, I felt stronger than I had in a long, long time. I looked at the trash can where the papers lay crumpled and whispered, not today. Not ever. I thought throwing them out of my house would buy me some peace. Maybe a week. Maybe 2. But I underestimated just how desperate they were. When people like Brian and Emily realize the gravy train has stopped, they don't look for jobs or solutions, they look for new ways to squeeze the person who's cut them off. It began with the phone calls. First, a trickle. Emily's number, Brian's number. Then, unknown numbers I didn't recognize. I blocked them all. I told myself silence was my shield. But silence doesn't stop a storm, it only makes you hear the thunder more clearly when it finally breaks. One Friday morning, the storm arrived. The doorbell rang just as I was finishing my breakfast. Through the window, I saw a neatly dressed woman in her 30s holding a leather folder. She wasn't a neighbor, and she didn't look like a salesperson. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Mr. Miller?" she asked, flashing an official-looking badge. "I'm Rachel Davis from the Office of Senior Services. We've received a report that you may be at risk financially and mentally. I need to conduct a wellness check." My blood turned to ice. A wellness check. I knew instantly where this had come from. Emily and Brian had wasted no time. If they couldn't bully me with a lawyer, they'd try to paint me as a confused old man unfit to manage his own affairs. I stepped aside stiffly, gesturing for her to enter. Refusing would only make me look worse. "Come in," I said, though the words tasted like ash. She sat at my dining table, pulling forms from her folder. "Mr. Miller, we've had reports of unusual behavior, cutting off financial support to your family abruptly, installing unnecessary security systems, and refusing medical or legal help. Can you explain these changes?" Her words were carefully chosen, but I could hear Emily's voice in them. That fake concern, the twisted spin. They had fed her every line. I forced myself to stay calm. The financial support I ended was not an obligation. It was a gift. One I no longer choose to give. The security system is for my protection. And the only legal help I've refused was a power of attorney designed to strip me of everything I own. MS. Davis tilted her head, scribbling notes. "Your children seem very worried about you. They believe you're isolating yourself and making irrational decisions." A laugh escaped me, bitter and sharp. "I've been isolated for years by them. The only thing irrational was me paying $30,000 to two able-bodied adults who never lifted a finger to stand on their own. Does that sound like mental decline to you, or does it sound like clarity?" She paused. For the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. Still, she pressed on. "Do you have documentation of your financial history with them?" "Yes," I said firmly. "Every bank transfer, every check, every bill I covered. I've kept it all." Before she could ask another question, I reached for my phone. "And before we go any further, I'm calling my attorney. I will not be questioned about my competence without legal representation present." She shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Miller, this isn't an interrogation. It's just—" "It feels exactly like one," I interrupted. "And if you're here in good faith, you'll have no objection to my lawyer joining us." 20 minutes later, Alan Weber, my attorney, walked into the room, his presence filling the space with calm authority. He glanced at MS. Davis's badge, then at me. "Mr. Miller, you don't need to answer any further questions today. If this office wants information, it will go through me." MS. Davis stiffened. "We have a duty to investigate family concerns. And I have a duty to protect my client from harassment," Weber replied, his tone crisp. He slid a folder onto the table. "Here are 3 years of bank records, totaling $30,000 in financial support Mr. Miller provided. Here is documentation of attempted coercion to sign a power of attorney. And here are statements from neighbors who've seen his clarity of mind firsthand. If you're truly here to evaluate risk, then the only risk is the ongoing exploitation of a vulnerable senior." Her pen froze mid-note. She leafed through the documents, her composure faltering. Finally, she sighed. Mr. Miller, based on this evidence, I see no immediate reason to pursue intervention. I'll be closing this report. Relief washed over me, but only briefly. Because I knew what it meant. Emily and Brian hadn't just crossed a line, they'd sprinted over it. If they were willing to sick a government office on me, what else were they capable of? After Ms. Davis left, Weber stayed behind. He studied me with eyes that had seen too many cases like mine. George, he said quietly, they're not going to stop. You've cut them off, and now they're escalating. The next step could be a petition in court to have you declared incompetent. It's rare, but it happens. The room swayed around me. So they could try to take my money legally. They can try, he confirmed. But they'll have to prove it. And we'll be ready. You're mentally sharp, your finances are in order, and now we have documentation of their attempts to manipulate you. But I won't lie to you, George, it's going to get uglier before it gets better. I sat in silence, staring at my hands. Wrinkled, calloused, the hands of a man who had built houses, fixed wiring, worked himself to the bone to give his daughter a better life. And now those same hands were seen by her husband as nothing more than keys to a bank account. Something hardened inside me then. I wasn't just defending my money anymore. I was defending my dignity, my freedom, the right to live my final years on my own terms. When Weber left, I locked the door, double-checked the new security system, and poured myself a drink. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the suffocating quiet of loneliness. It was the steady silence of resolve. Emily and Brian had declared war. They wanted control. They wanted power. But for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight. 3 weeks later, the letter arrived. Thick envelope. County seal stamped across the front. My stomach sank even before I tore it open. It was official. Emily and Brian had filed a petition for guardianship. Their claim, I was suffering from cognitive decline and was no longer capable of handling my financial affairs. They wanted the court to appoint them as my legal guardians. In plain English, they wanted ownership of me. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning. I hardly slept the night before. I ironed my best black suit, polished my shoes until they shined. Staring into the mirror, I studied the lines on my face, the silver in my hair, the eyes that still burned clear and sharp. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving to a judge, to the world, maybe even to myself that I was still here. Still capable. Still George Miller. Alan Weber picked me up at 8 a.m. Remember, he said as we drove downtown, the burden of proof is on them. They have to show the court you're incompetent. All we need to do is show the truth. But truth, I knew, could sometimes lose to theatrics. And Emily and Brian had always been good at putting on a show. The courthouse was crowded that morning, the air heavy with tension. When we walked into the family courtroom, my eyes immediately found them. Emily sat stiffly in a navy dress, her hair pulled back, clutching a tissue like she was already grieving. Brian, beside her, wore a new suit he had no doubt bought on credit. He looked smug, but beneath the surface, I saw the twitch of nerves in his jaw. Their attorney, a polished man with silver hair, stood confidently at their side. The judge entered, a tall, serious man named Judge Harrington, known for his no-nonsense approach. We all rose, then sat when instructed. Counsel, the judge began, you may proceed. Emily and Brian's lawyer stepped forward. Your Honor, this case is about protecting an elderly man from his own decline. Mr. George Miller has exhibited alarming changes in behavior, abruptly cutting off financial support to his family, isolating himself, and refusing necessary medical and legal assistance. His children, out of love and concern, are asking this court to appoint them as guardians to ensure his safety and stability. I nearly laughed out loud. Love and concern. They'd weaponized the very words that should have meant comfort. The lawyer continued, "You will hear from witnesses who can attest to Mr. Miller's irrational actions and declining judgment. Our only goal is his well-being." Then it was showtime. Emily was the first witness. She stepped up to the stand, eyes glistening with rehearsed tears. "My dad has always been generous," she said, her voice trembling. "But recently, he's changed. He won't talk to us, won't answer calls, and he cancelled all support without warning. It's like he's not the same man anymore. We're scared he's being influenced by outsiders who don't have his best interests at heart." Their lawyer guided her gently. "Emily, would you say your father is confused at times?" She dabbed her eyes. "Yes. He forgets things. He gets angry easily. He doesn't trust us like he used to." I clenched my fists under the table. Every word was a knife. Next came Brian. His performance was less refined, but just as poisonous. "Your Honor, George has always been there for us. But now, out of nowhere, he's acting paranoid. He accuses us of using him, when all we've ever done is love him. He put in security cameras, stopped paying bills he promised to cover. It's not normal behavior. We're just trying to protect him from himself." Their witnesses followed. A neighbor claimed I was erratic for shouting at Brian in the driveway. Another swore I seemed confused when I ignored their wave at the mailbox. Thin evidence, twisted into a damning picture. Then it was our turn. Alan rose, his voice steady. "Your Honor, what we've just heard is a story, not proof. Mr. Miller is not declining, is finally standing up against years of financial exploitation. We will show you evidence of $30,000 drained from his accounts over 3 years. We will show you witnesses who attest to his clarity. And we will show you a professional evaluation confirming his excellent cognitive health." He called our first witness, Dr. Moore, the psychologist who had tested me weeks earlier. She presented her findings with crisp authority. "Mr. Miller's memory, reasoning, and problem-solving skills are well above average for his age. He is fully capable of managing his finances." Then came Alan Peters, the bank manager. He described in detail how I had regularly transferred money for Emily and Brian's benefit, how the sudden stop was a rational decision after years of strain. "Mr. Miller was not confused," Peters said. "He was fed up." Finally, it was my turn. Walking to the witness stand, I felt every eye in the room on me. Emily's wet with false sorrow, Brian's hard with resentment, the judge's steady and unreadable. Alan guided me gently through my testimony. I told the court about the rent, the groceries, the hospital bills. About the $30,000 gone. About the wedding I wasn't invited to. "Why did you stop the financial support?" Alan asked. I met the judge's gaze. "Because I realized I wasn't family to them. I was a wallet. I wasn't invited to my daughter's wedding, but my money was. I'm not incompetent, Your Honor. I'm just done being used." Their lawyer tried to rattle me in cross-examination. "Mr. Miller, isn't it true you shouted at your daughter and her husband? Isn't it true you refused medical evaluations?" "I shouted," I said firmly, "because they broke into my house with a lawyer and demanded control of my finances. And I refused unnecessary evaluations because I already knew I was fine." Which my doctor confirmed. The judge nodded slightly, making notes. When closing arguments came, their lawyer painted me as paranoid, manipulated by outsiders. Alan's rebuttal was devastating. "Your Honor, what we've seen here is not incompetence. It's independence. This is not a man losing his mind, it's a man reclaiming it after years of exploitation." The courtroom went silent as Judge Harrington leaned back in his chair, hands steepled. "I will take time to review the evidence and render my decision." The gavel struck. Recess. As I left the stand, Emily avoided my eyes. Brian glared daggers. And for the first time, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like a man who had finally spoken the truth where it mattered most. The verdict would come soon. But in my heart, I already knew, no matter what the judge decided, I had already won something more important. My voice. My dignity. 2 weeks after the hearing, I got the call I had been waiting for. Alan's voice was calm, steady, but I could hear the satisfaction underneath. "George," he said, "the judge has made his decision. We won. The guardianship petition is denied completely. The court recognized that you are of sound mind and fully capable of managing your affairs. They even noted that your children's motives appeared financial, not protective." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just sat there in my chair, staring at the wall, my heart pounding. When I finally managed to whisper, it was only 2 words, "Thank God." I hung up and let the silence of my little house wash over me. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear. It wasn't the suffocating quiet of being abandoned. It was the silence of freedom. Later that afternoon, I put on my suit again and drove downtown. Judge Harrington delivered the verdict formally in court. His words still echo in my ears. Mr. George Miller is mentally competent and financially independent. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, this court finds that undue influence has been exerted by family members seeking financial benefit. This case is closed. The gavel struck. Just like that, it was over. Emily bowed her head, avoiding my gaze. Brian clenched his jaw, his hands balled into fists at his sides. I could almost feel the heat of his anger. But neither of them said a word. Their lawyer packed up his papers quickly, clearly unhappy with how thoroughly Alan had dismantled their case. I stood tall as I walked out of that courtroom. I didn't rush. I didn't hide. I walked slowly, deliberately, because I wanted them to see that I wasn't broken, wasn't weak, wasn't theirs to control. That night, I opened the envelope with the $1,000 I had once saved for their wedding gift. I slid the bills out and spread them across the table. For months, that envelope had felt like a weight, a symbol of everything I had lost. Now it was something else, a reminder that my generosity would no longer be wasted. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a trip. A week-long fishing charter in Alaska, something I had dreamed of since my 20s. I paid the deposit with a smile, not a shred of guilt. My money was finally mine to use on the life I wanted, not the life they demanded. The weeks that followed were strange but beautiful. I replaced the locks on my doors, cut new keys that only I possessed. I updated my will with Alan's help, making sure no one could ever manipulate it. I even bought myself a new winter coat, the thick one I had denied myself all those years ago when Emily called about the heating bill. Every time I zipped it up, I felt a small, quiet triumph. Of course, Emily tried to reach out a few more times. Texts, emails, even a handwritten letter that arrived one morning. The words were sugary, apologetic on the surface, but underneath I could see the same manipulation. "We miss you, Dad. We love you. We just want things to go back to how they were." But how they were meant me paying, them taking, and love measured in dollar signs. I threw the letter in the trash. Some nights, I still ache for the little girl Emily once was, the one who used to ride on my shoulders at the county fair, the one who used to whisper, "You're the best dad in the world." Losing her, really losing her, was like losing Mary all over again. But I realized something vital: I hadn't lost my daughter this year. I had lost her years ago, when she decided my worth was measured only in what I could give. Now, at least, I had stopped losing myself. One crisp autumn evening, I sat on my porch watching the leaves fall, sipping a bourbon I didn't feel guilty buying. The sun dipped below the horizon, streaking the sky with gold and crimson. For the first time in decades, I felt not just alive but free. Free from the endless demands. Free from the manipulation. Free from the lie that my love had to be purchased. I wasn't just George Miller, the old man who paid bills. I was George Miller, a man who had reclaimed his dignity. I thought back to Brian's smug face the day he told me I wasn't a special guest. And I smiled. Because now I finally knew the truth. Special isn't something you beg to be. Special isn't something you buy. Special is something you know in your bones because you refuse to let anyone take it from you. That night, before turning in, I whispered to myself the same words I had spoken months ago, back when this battle began. No more. And this time, it wasn't just a promise. It was the foundation of the rest of my life.